Hey Doug, what you doing?
Hey Ellen, getting ready for winter. We're prepping the garden for the winter time.
So I'm wondering, what do we do about tucking in the soil, the garden for the winter? Like, what do we put in the soil and how do we cover it?
Cool.
So if you could just maybe start with what you're gonna do to the soil and why,
Great.
that'd be great.
I'm glad you asked because I have everything right here.
Oh, look at that.
So it's almost October. It's the end of September right now, and so this is a very good time to think about putting the garden and the soil to rest for the winter time in a way that's also going to be feeding the soil and supporting the soil for the winter and then into spring. So we brought just a couple things just to kind of give a framework for it, but we brought a little bit of this is dirt. You can say, and then this is soil. Someone once said to me once that dirt and soil are not the same thing. Soil is a living organism. Bacteria, fungi, all things that make it a living organism. When we speak about dirt and soil, people use them synonymously, but sometimes it's good to think about that they are not always the same thing. That soil is alive, dirt is not alive. So we are trying to keep the soil from becoming dirt, essentially. We are trying to maintain the life force in the soil and build on that life throughout the season, throughout the winter into the spring.
So what are you gonna mix together?
So one way to do that is to recognize that the gardens that we are taking care of often have been depleted of nutrients because of many reasons, but deforestation and exposure and erosion. And so sometimes adding minerals back to the soil is important. Minerals that have been lost through those ways. So we have a few different rock dusts. This is kind of like adding like a whole food diet, whole food nutrition to the soil. Just as people, it's important that we have a full rounded whole diet to be well. Same with the soil. And what that can look like is different forms of raw minerals, which is basically just rock, stone that has been ground up into fines, into dust. And this is what we add to the soil as food for the soil life. So we have here some spring blend, which is made specifically, particularly for spring, but is also very good throughout the year as an amendment to the soil. So we're going to mix a little bit of the rock dust together, and we have some azomite, which is a broad spectrum trace mineral and macro element amendment, and we have some.
That's the basalt.
This is basalt. So this is a quarry dust, a rock dust, paramagnetic, so adding a very beneficial energy to the soil. And so we have the minerals, so that's the rock, the mineral part, and those all mixed together. And then I'm going to take a couple handfuls of compost, which is the inoculant, which is the biology. And so it's very important to think about that we have the mineral and also the biological. The mineral will become available to the plants in the garden only through the breaking down and assimilation done by bacteria and fungi that are in the soil, in compost. So we are mixing the two together so that the bacteria and the fungi and the life in the compost is now surrounding the mineral. And when we amend that to the soil, that life can start to digest that mineral into the soil and then be ready for the plants to grow. So we have the compost and the mineral here. And what we're also going to add is a cover crop. So we're going to add, this time of year, it's a little late for the winter kill, the oats and field peas, just because it's not enough time before the hard frost is going to come for the oats to get tall. So we're adding rye, winter pea, and forage. So that's the overwintering mix to the compost mineral mixture. Mix those all together. So now we have the mineral the compost, which is the humus, the biology, the carbon, and the plants that are going to start growing and feeding the soil and taking sunlight, turning it into sugar, and being the home for all that biology around the roots and the minerals. So these three things together we're going to add to the soil, and that's going to be the preparation for the winter and into the spring.
Let's do it.
So what that's going to look like, and different folks can do it differently, however you're feeling it. But what I like to do, so this time of year there's still plants growing in the garden. Eggplants are still doing quite well, so we don't want to take them away. We want them to keep growing. So I'm just going to add a few handfuls of the mix, the mineral, the compost, and the cover crop right around the plants on the soil, just like that. And then I'm going to take the rest of that. So now everything's down and ready to be worked into the soil. So
how do you know how much to use of each ingredient? People always ask that.
Yeah. So I was taught how to cook by my grandma, who is from Sicily and never uses recipes. And that is kind of the way that I work too. I don't know very much other than just like kind of feeling it out and listening to what, just as if you were to add salt to a sauce or something, you kind of use your feel, use your intuition to know how much you're gonna put. But people who function a little bit more, maybe with direction a little bit more, I would say you want like a seed every inch or so. This is a little bit closer. I tend to put a little bit more down just in case, but well spread. So every seed will have like every plant will have like an inch in between. So if you want to be more particular, that's how much you can use.
Okay.
But you saw I just kind of used a handful and spread it around evenly. So once the cover crop mineral compost is down, then I'm just going to use my hands to work it gently into the soil while bringing also some of the weeds that are growing. Gonna kind of do a few things at once and just bring the weeds, pull the weeds up and pull the weeds kind of over like this, like shaking off the soil from the roots so the roots are exposed. And now I'm gonna like just leave the roots facing upwards of the weeds. So they're going to start to decompose, and as they're decomposing and dying back into the soil, they're also protecting the cover crop seeds. It's very, very dry right now, and so having some kind of cover over the seeds is going to help protect and keep moisture in the soil. So I'm using the weeds to do that, to protect the cover crop seeds, give them enough time to regrow. So they're also a mulch, the weeds. So I'm just going to bring up everything while I'm also, you can see I'm kind of mixing in the soil, mixing in the seeds with my hands like this, just kind of gently so that they're covered by the soil, or at least touching the soil, so that when they germinate, their roots will cling into the soil and have somewhere to grow from. So I'm just kind of messing around the soil, bringing the weeds up, kind of around, shaking the soil off the roots of the weeds. So in a way, this is, I think for me, an honoring of these plants that are we call weeds, recognizing that they are and have been doing a lot of beautiful work in protecting and generating the soil. So rather than discarding them, I'm just bringing them back into the garden where they can continue to provide their life into the garden. As they die, they'll become the soil again.
So what happens after your cover crop is up, growing through the weeds or whatever cover, is there something else we need to do to protect the soil during the winter?
So if you have cover crop growing,
Like other materials, I mean?
So mixing all of them together, like we did, the minerals, the compost, that's enough for this place. But if you can't, if it's say too late to plant a cover crop, you know, by the time November comes around, it's a little late to plant anything like that. You can use other forms of mulch. So say it's November now, and the soil is still uncovered. Covering the soil is probably one of the most important things you can do. So if you can't do anything else during the year, covering the soil through the winter, through the season, always having the soil covered is probably the most important thing you can do. So a few things that you can do, use to cover the soil at any time. We live in the deciduous Northeast, so there's plenty of leaves. You can use old, just dried up leaves as a mulch. And the same kind of thing, I'll just crumple them up. So if you're using leaves, one important thing is to make sure that they're kind of ground up a little bit, just because if they're flat, they'll lay on top of each other and create like an anaerobic environment. So just covering the soil around the plants with the leaves, with leaves, or you can use, we have some plant material. So if, like we were doing before, if you're weeding and you're pulling up plants, let them sit in the sun for a couple of days, dry out, let the roots dry. The plant will die. It's best to use plants that haven't gone to seed yet, unless you want to spread the seeds.
Whoops, there's some seeds in there.
Yeah, so this is Tulsi, which will spread, but it's a lovely thing to have, lovely plant to have. So you can use plant material, you can also use hay. So I love using hay. It is relatively easy to find, it's cheap. Often it's a hay bale that was left out in the rain at a farm, you can use as mulch. So with the hay, use just the same as the leaves. I'll just spread evenly.
Is that thick enough to last through the winter?
Yeah, I would say I like to put it on thick. So I'll have at least six inches of fluffy hay over the soil, and that provides a shelter to the soil. It keeps like that even the top few inches of soil just protected through the winter, so that earthworms and microorganisms don't have to dig too deep, but they'll stay up around the plants. So I'll put on a good thick amount, however I can, but even a little bit is going to do a lot. Just a little bit of cover, one blade of hay that will stop a raindrop from hitting the soil is doing a lot. So just having some kind of cover over the soil. I always say you don't want to see soil. If you see soil, that means the sun sees soil, the rain sees soil. So covering soil is maintaining the balance and the health of the ecosystem.
That sounds great, Doug.
So that's the hay and the cover crop, and it's autumn, and that's a good way to start going into winter.
Cool. Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome, Ellen.